I welcome you to the Messiah channel. We are an end time channel. We alert you about events happening in the world and how they relate to the end times. In today's message, we are focusing on the 7 groups of people who will be offended by Black Hebrew Awakening. When we are doing awakening of the Black Hebrews scattered over the world, who will be offended. There are 7 groups of people who will be offended. Before we go to discuss the 7 groups of people, I remind you that because the end is very close, we'll try as much as possible to release a video one day, every day. We'll try to release a video every day to alert you about events that have relevance to the end times. You can reach me at my email address, raptureafrica@yahoo.com, small letters. So let's go to our message. The 7 groups of people who will be offended. They'll be angry, they'll be infuriated because we are doing Hebrew awakening, because the Hebrews scattered over the world are being awakened. The first group number 1, Satan and his agents. They will be offended. They wouldn't like for the Black Hebrews scattered over the world to be awakened. And don't be surprised. The scriptures are very clear. Satan doesn't want the Messiah to come. Satan doesn't want the prophecies and the promises given to the Hebrews to materialize. And so we remember at the time when Yeshua was going to be born, the King Herod, killed Hebrew boys. The same thing happened in Egypt. When a leader was going to come out of the Hebrews in the land of bondage, the pharaohs decided to kill all Hebrew boys. And so in the end times, when we are awakening the Hebrews scattered over the world, Satan and his agents will be offended. The second group who will be offended is Egypt, the pharaohs. When the Bible talks about Egypt, it talks about a land of bondage, as referenced in Exodus chapter 20, verse 2. The Hebrews were scattered to the New Egypt, and I believe the United States is the Egypt spoken of in Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 68. And why would Egypt be offended? Egypt to be offended because Egypt doesn't want the Hebrews hidden in her territory to be awakened. And so if you look at America's history, whether you are talking about the civil rights movement, whether you are talking about the Black Panther movement, whether you are talking about the Black Lives Matter movement, there has always been a strategy to discredit, to infiltrate, and undermine any Black consciousness. And so at the time that the Hebrew is being awakened in Egypt, the pharaohs will not be happy. They will be offended. You remember what happened during the civil rights movement, the counter-pro plot engineered by Elijah Hoover to monitor suppress, discredit, and also take out any possibility of a black Messiah. So Egypt, all places where the Hebrews were scattered, they will not be very happy when the Hebrew is being awakened. The third group of people who will be offended by Hebrew awakening, the black Hebrew awakening, is the black church. Unfortunately, the black church, whether you're talking about the black church in Alabama, the black church in Chicago, the black church in Mississippi, the African church in Nigeria, in Ghana, some of them will not be very happy. Why? Because in the end times, these churches have turned out to be Laodicean churches. They are lukewarm churches. They have deviated from the teachings of the Bible. The black church in America is now LGBT affirming church. It's a church that is hampered by 501c. There are so many things that they cannot talk about on the pulpit because they are constrained. They have conformed to the status quo. They are also not prepared. The pastors are not prepared for the coming of the Lord. And so they are not awakened themselves. They are not awakened themselves. They don't understand the Bible. They don't understand the imminency of the coming of the Messiah. How can they prepare the pulpit? How can they awaken the negroes? So the black church, whether in Africa or whether in America, in the land of bondage, they will be offended when you begin to tell them that the Hebrews are the negroes who were scattered to the four corners of the earth. They will be ashamed to talk about it because they were trained with a lens, Eurocentric lens, to look at the Bible from an Eurocentric perspective. The fourth group who will be offended when we talk about black Hebrew awakening, those who maintain the status quo people, the media, they will be offended when you talk about black Hebrew awakening. They will be offended because you'll be talking about things that they have hidden for centuries. You are talking about something that they don't want to hear. You are talking about something that they know, but they have kept it secret. The secret is that the Negro who is scattered over the world, he is the Hebrew spoken of in the Bible. He is the Hebrew who fits the prophecy in the Bible, the prophecy as foretold by the prophet Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Isaiah, a prophecy that God himself gave to Abraham in Genesis chapter 15, verses 13 to 14. The fifth group of people who will be offended when we talk about black Hebrew awakening, they are the evangelicals. In America, there are a lot of them. They are political pastors. They preach what is politically correct. They have been influenced by Eurocentric biblical analysis from the Bible commentaries that were compiled during the time of slavery and after the time of slavery. They will be offended when you talk about black Hebrew awakening. They will be offended because in their training, they have been taught that God is a white God, Jesus is a white Jesus. The disciples were white, everything was white. And even when the Roman Catholic Church painted the black Madonna to depict a black Jesus, now they have rejected. They have rejected the idea. They've rejected the writings of their own people who knew or who know that the Hebrew, the person that they call the Negro is actually a Hebrew. The evangelicals will be offended when you suddenly talk about black Hebrews in the land of oppression. They will be offended because they are looking at a nation that was founded in 1948. They are looking at a state that is white. And so all their prophecies, all their thinking is about a white Jew, a white Hebrew. So they'll be offended when suddenly you disturb their ears by talking about black Hebrew awakening. Number 6, a group of people who will be offended. These are black people themselves. And some of them even call themselves black Hebrew Israelites. They will be offended. And the reason why they're offended is that there are so many disunity, so many infiltration, so many compromise in the black Hebrew community. And so people are talking about sects, black Hebrew sects. People are talking about black Hebrew cults. People are talking about violence. To prove to somebody that you are a black Hebrew Israelite, it doesn't mean you have to be violent. It doesn't mean you have to be vulgar. It doesn't mean that you have to be hateful. There's a nice way, diplomatic way, a more mature way of proving your Hebrew identity rather than being violent. And because of the violence, because of the vulgarity, because of the aggressiveness that some people use in proving that they are Hebrew Israelites, it has turned off so many people. So those who will be offended when we talk about black Hebrew Israelites will be black people themselves. And when we talk about black people, you also talk about some black religious and political groups inside the United States. There are some people who belong to the Nation of Islam. Are they Hebrews? Are they from the tribe of Jacob? Are they from the 12 tribes of Israel? If they are from the tribe of Judah, have they converted to Islam? When we're talking about black groups in the United States, we're talking about the Nation of Islam, we're talking about the black Hebrew Israelites. And according to research, it will not be long, it will not be too long, the black Hebrew Israelites will probably overtake the Nation of Islam in terms of political relevance in the United States. People are not worried. Now, when people talk about Black Lives Matter, people are not worried. The powers that be, they are not worried when they hear about the Nation of Israel. All of a sudden, when you talk about black Hebrew Israelites, they are concerned, they are worried. And even some people in the Nation of Islam are worried when they hear about the black Hebrew Israelites. Finally, the last group of people who will be offended is the state that was founded in 1948, the Jewish state. Why will Israel be offended when you talk about black Hebrew Israelites? They will be offended because they assume that they are the chosen people. They assume that the Balfour Declaration signed in 1948 is a prophetic testament that they, as the chosen people of God, have been regarded. They will be worried because when people talk about Hebrews, they assume that Hebrews are white. All of a sudden, you see negroes with dark faces, with pointed noses, kinky hair, from poor countries and neighborhoods, from ghettos. Some people call them idiots. They are talking about the Hebrew identity. They will be offended. And so, when poor people in Ethiopia call themselves Jews, Israel was offended. How can you be a Jew? You are a black person, and so you cannot be a Jew. And later on, they changed their mind. You are a Jew, but you cannot be black at the same time. And so they use a derogatory word, falasha, the falasha Jews. A falasha means a foreigner, a stranger. It's a derogatory word which they used or have used to despise and disparage, discredit, dehumanize the Hebrews from Ethiopia. They are ignorant of the fact that the Hebrews from Ethiopia are the direct descendant of King Solomon. They are ignorant of the fact that King Solomon married the Queen of Sheba from Ethiopia. They are ignorant of the fact that they had a son, Menelik, who became the first Solomonic king in Ethiopia. They are ignorant, or probably they are envious of the fact that Emperor Haile Selassie was a direct descendant of King Solomon. And so they will be offended. They will be offended because they cannot prove a Hebrew identity. When you look at Deuteronomy chapter 28, which pronounce curses on the true children of Elohim, they cannot prove that they were shipped into Egypt again. And so they will be offended when the Negro with a kinky hair, dark skin, is able to prove his Hebrew identity by combing the prophecy in Deuteronomy 28:68 and mentioning the name of the ship, the white lion that took him to New Egypt, and mentioning the British ship, the Zong, Z-O-N-G, the Zong ship, the ship that left the slave coast in Ghana heading towards Jamaica, the ship that conducted the massacre of the Hebrews, the ship that took 130 and more Hebrews, negroes, and put them in the sea so that they will be drowned. The song ship, the British ship, the British slave ship, they will be angry because those who call themselves the true Hebrews are not able to fit themselves into prophecy. When you talk about the true prophecy about the Hebrew, when you talk about the curses in Deuteronomy chapter 28, when you talk about the Holocaust of the Negro stretching not for a century, but going into centuries, 400 years of the history of the Negro. So Israel will be offended. They will be offended because they are aware of the Bible and what the Bible has said. The Bible has said that Jerusalem, the holy city chosen by the king, King David, they will be trodden underfoot by the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles are up. They will be offended because they know what the Messiah said in the book of Revelation. Those who say they are Jews, but they are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. They will be offended when the sons and daughters of Jacob, who were asleep, who were suppressed, who were oppressed, who were repressed, who were denied knowledge from the Bible, who were given the slave Bible, now are talking about their Hebrew identity when they are awakened in the end times. No wonder somebody wrote a book from Hebrews to negroes, Ronald Dalton from the United States, and there was a media storm because those who maintain the status quo wouldn't want to be offended by a voice crying from the wilderness, from the ghettos of Mississippi to the mountains in Mombasa, talking about Black Hebrew awakening. And so it is not everybody who will be happy when the Hebrew is awakened, when the Negro is awakened. But the time has come where the awakening of the Negro cannot be stopped, because the Most High is about to fulfill his prophecy, the prophecy of the redemption of his chosen people. Thank you. Subscribe to this channel, share the video, hit the notification button. We are going to release more videos. We'll try and release a video a day, because the time has come for the regathering of the Hebrews scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. Thank you for this message.